Catherine Herridge just coming out with a really gangbuster testimony today. So Catherine Herridge was fired in a big swoop from CBS News. They actually fired a whole bunch of people. A lot of questions as to how and why this all went down. She was involved with some litigation, and she was asked to give up some sources, and she refused to do so. After 5 years there being at the network, I used to work with her at Fox, and I can tell you she's an outstanding reporter. Really, like one that dots the I's and crosses the T's and all that good stuff. So really, really good reporter. And she has historically done a lot of stories that are somewhat critical of the deep state, so to speak. And apparently she was working on a story, and some people at CBS and the US government wanted her to turn over some sources, as I understand this. And she said, no can do, because these are my sources and I'm not going to turn these people into you. And the next thing you know, she's part of this mass layoff, and a lot of people are asking, with good reason, some questions. Do we have Catherine Herridge that we can go to first? Because then I want to show you guys Sharyl Atkinson as well, who also used to work at CBS and also had some strange experiences. But let's start here first with Catherine.
I was laid off in February. An incident reinforced in my mind the importance of protecting confidential sources. CBS News locked me out of the building and seized hundreds of pages of my reporting files, including confidential source information. Multiple sources said they were concerned that by working with me to expose government corruption and misconduct, they would be identified and exposed. I pushed back, and with the public support of my union, SAG-AFTRA, the records were returned. CBS News' decision to seize my reporting records crossed a red line that I believe should never be crossed again by any media organization in the future.
Wow. So she's testifying there, pushing for legislation that would ensure that reporters and their sources could be protected. This came up as well with Sharyl Atkinson, who also used to work at CBS News, and I worked with her there. And again, I just want to compliment her on her reporting. She was and is a phenomenal reporter, has a podcast herself now, and she was very frank about some things. Well, Jim Jordan had a lot to say as well, because the circumstances by which she left CBS were interesting. I'll let Drew play this clip here.
The chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Atkinson, you wrote stories critical of the Obama administration. Is that accurate?
Yes, but may I point out it wasn't put in a political light, and there were also stories that some would consider critical of the Bush administration.
Well, let's say it this way. You wrote stories critical of the government.
Yes.
Yeah. You factually reported. And then you did on Fast and Furious, you did on Benghazi and other issues.
Yes.
And even before, as you said, on the Bush administration. And then strange things started happening to you, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like your computer, you think your phone gets bugged, you believe, and things happen to your computer after you wrote stories critical of the government.
Right.
That's scary, right?
Yeah, it's not a
frightening
comfortable
everybody.
feeling, right?
Ms. Herridge, you wrote stories critical of the Biden administration. Is that true?
That's fair.
I mean, you wrote a number of things about the laptop issue, about Hunter Biden, all kinds of things. You wrote critical of the Biden family, the Biden business operation, the Biden brand, and all that stuff.
Congressman, I reported out the facts of the story.
You sure did. You sure did. You reported the facts. And then CBS fired you. Is that right?
My position was terminated.
Yeah, and you're an award-winning journalist. How long did you work at CBS?
I worked at CBS News for 4.5 years. During that period, we won major awards. I was part of an Emmy-winning team. I was nominated for investigative Emmys. I think the most important projects were projects that drove legislation here on the Hill that positively impacted 1 million veterans.
So award-winning journalist, won all kinds of awards, had worked there almost 5 years, had extensive experience at a different major network prior to that, where you were also an award-winning journalist, done all kinds of reporting critical of the government there as well, and then you get fired. But it's worse than that, isn't it? Because they didn't just fire you. What else did they do?
On February 13th, when I was told on a Zoom call that my employment was terminated, I was locked out of my emails and I was locked out of the office. CBS News seized hundreds of pages of my reporting files, including confidential source information.
And that's not normal, is it?
No, that's not my experience in the other two networks that I've worked at or with my colleagues. at CBS News. When the network of Walter Cronkite seizes your reporting files, including confidential source information, that is an attack on investigative journalism.
Yes, it sure is. So I'm just trying to, it seems to me there's a pattern developing here. You're critical of the government, Miss Atkinson situation, and shazam, they start doing all kinds of strange things to your phone line, to your computer. You're critical of the government at a major news organization, and you're an award-winning journalist. You've been there 5 years, you get fired. But it's not just that you got fired. In fact, we can, maybe there's nothing to that. But what we do know is they seized your documents. That's scary as well. And you talk about a chilling effect on the First Amendment. I don't know how it could be more chilling. Now, thank goodness the lady sitting beside you, they stepped in, right? Because they're stepping in and helping. Them stepping in help you get your, because you got your files back finally, didn't you?
I did get the files back. If I didn't have the support of SAG-AFTRA really publicly standing up for journalism, I don't believe that I would have received the files and they would have been returned. And I just want to be clear, Congressman, wherever you work, if this happened to you, it's an attack on free press, it's an attack on the First Amendment. It makes it more challenging for reporters to work in the future. That disrupts the free flow of information to the public. They call it journalism a profession for a reason, because it's about an informed electorate, and it's a cornerstone of our democracy. I can only speak for myself. When my records were seized, I felt it was a journalistic rape.
Ms. Cavallaro, have you ever seen that before, where when someone is leaving an employment at a major news organization, they seize their documents?
I can't say that SAG-AFTRA is familiar with every single case of termination or departure where...
I'm not asking that. I'm saying, have you ever seen anything like this?
I have no recollection of seeing...
Well, that should scare us too. First time it ever happened, and it happens to an award-winning journalist who's been in this profession for a number of years, known all across the profession. And that happens on the heels of what happened to Ms. Atkinson, because both journalists were critical of the government. That's exactly that's what journalism is about, being critical of the government when the government's doing things wrong, and then to have a major news organization or the government itself do this. In your testimony, Ms. Herridge, you had a very important line. You said, if confidential sources are not protected, journalism is dead. And I agree, but it would seem to me if retaliation is allowed by the government or by some major media outlet, journalism is dead as well. And that's what this hearing's about. And I, again, want to thank you all for...
Pretty remarkable stuff. So Catherine Herridge lost her position, and then they took all her stuff. Sharyl Atkinson, I remember this at the time. I mean, they were like sort of suggesting that she was nutty because she revealed that her computer files had been broken into by the Obama administration and her cell phone had been hacked. Well, it turned out she wasn't the only one. Jim Rosen, who was also a reporter at Fox News at that time, said the exact same thing happened to him. So you see kind of a pattern. You know, I remember when Trump was in office and he would call out the likes of Jim Acosta right to his face and say something kind of nasty, like, get out of here, you don't belong, you're fake news, etc. The difference, ladies and gentlemen, between Donald Trump's approach and the Obama or the Biden administration's approach, in my estimation, is that one, being Trump, would just call you right out to your face. He'd tell you exactly what you think. It's kind of like the Queen's style approach, right? Queen's New York, versus the approach of going behind your back and maybe hacking into your computer or sending notes to your bosses or getting into your phone or intimidating your bosses, which in my estimation may have been what went down with Catherine Herridge and Sharyl Atkinson. And so that's frightening, because then you're not allowed to do your job. I mean, look, you always get pushback. You always get pushback, as, you know, I remember reporting on the Patriot Act, and the Bush administration didn't like what I had to say about the Patriot Act because, of course, you know, I didn't like the Patriot Act, and I might have kind of worked that in somehow as an angle in one of my stories when I was at CBS. And They sent a letter. They sent a letter to my bosses. Fortunately, my bosses didn't really do anything about it. It kind of all blew over, whatever. Of course, it was a Republican administration. If I had chosen the same attack on a Democrat administration, I don't know if I could have promised you the same upshot of the ordeal. But the point is that this kind of stuff happens. And what you need is an organization that's willing to stand up to power, right? And say, I'm going to protect my reporters. I'm going to protect their reporting. I'm going to protect them and their sources. And if you don't have that, then how do you speak truth to power? I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm here. It's one of the reasons why I love it here. It's one of the reasons why you can't get any more natural and real than what's going on in this environment right now, where we've been building organically, literally viewer by viewer, knocking on 300,000 right now over on YouTube. And then we're live on Twitter as well. So a shout out to all you guys over there. We're live on Facebook, but really we've been able to build this because I think you're seeking a purity in the reporting that I so desire to be able to deliver. And this is the one place where, you don't have somebody breathing down your back saying you can or cannot say something. And so I think Catherine will go on to have an amazing future. Sharyl already has, but this is the reality of sort of the world in which we live.